welcome Stephanie Luke, who will present From Tactile to Digital, Advancing IIIF's Role in Representing Complex Physical Collections.
Thank you. I'm Assistant Professor, Metadata Librarian at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Library. I'm here representing my colleagues Ruth Ann and Siobhan, who were not able to make the conference. So the digital collections at our library provide web access to many of the library's signature holdings for students, scholars, and the general public. So they include a lot, digitized books, photographs, maps, newspapers, personal papers, and born digital materials, as well as the ephemeral and realia collections that I'll be discussing today. So users can search the library's digital special collections. Our digitization services unit works primarily with special collections, as well as unique or at-risk material from other areas of the library. And so our mission is to create long-term digital preservation and access for collections like these. So some context about the Illinois Library's implementation of IIIF. I had to ask my colleagues about this that are on the development team because I wasn't quite sure. But the library uses the Cantaloupe image server, universal viewer, and a custom library application. The system also integrates rights.org categories, which is important to the use and reuse of these materials. So I'm not an expert, obviously, on this, but if you want to know more about it, reach out to me and I can get you in touch with our development team. So the Illinois Digital Library has traditionally focused on print materials, 2D print materials, rather than realia and ephemera. So before our work on these collections, we only had one other collection from with 3D, three-dimensional objects, which were a collection of American band instruments. And unfortunately, right now, we aren't set up in our lab to create 3D images, so we've had to be really creative in how we show that these images are, tactile and physical and 3D and that sort of thing. So the largest challenge in creating these collections was bringing the curator's visions to life. So these are all non-circulating, three-dimensional materials. And it was important for us that even though, you can go in and access these in-house in building, that we expand the access to include places beyond the campus, even internationally. So, so let me share some information about the collections I'm highlighting today. There's 3 of them. So over the past 5 years, Ruth Ann and Siobhan, who are the curators at the Rare Books and Manuscript Library and the Ricker Art and Architecture Library, respectively, they've collaborated to bring 3 different collections into our digital library. So early in their time at Illinois, they were working together to explore the intersection of play and learning within special collections outreach. So much of this framework came about from semi-hands-on workshops on the history of medieval manuscripts. They started to have conversations about what other items in these collections were candidates for play with primary sources, and they immediately selected the first one, which is the Historical Board Games collection. So it primarily includes printings of early circulated board games from the turn of the 20th century. And the games relate to lottery, chance, gambling, and money, which we think further facilitate discussions about colonization, migration, and depictions of the exotic other in the form of play. So debuting on our digital library in January 2023, the Ricker Materials Collection is a sample of new, innovative, and common physical materials, including wood, fibers, paper, textiles, ceramics, concrete, foam, anything you can think of that's used to build something is in there. So this provides a space for people to touch, feel, and explore materials while learning about new and old manufacturing innovations, and it also helps contextualize material culture. So these are all materials that are typically found in industries that specialize in fashion, product design, architecture, interior design. And they're really crucial sandboxes for making decisions about how the final product or space will look and feel. So it was developed for the Art and Architecture School, and it continues to grow according to the research needs and interests of our students, staff, and general public. And the third collection I'm discussing today consists of realia from Gwendolyn Brooks, who is an American poet and author from Chicago, Illinois. So in 1950, Brooks won a Pulitzer Prize for poetry. She was the first ever Black author to win in any category. And she later became the Poet Laureate of Illinois and a consultant in poetry for the Library of Congress. And the items that we selected out of this large collection for digitization included personal scrapbooks and recipe boxes. So now that we have some context, let's discuss some of the curatorial decisions for each collection. So board games are meant to be used and physically interacted with, and the condition of the original items in this collection reflect that. The edges and some of the cards are pretty worn. So we were concerned first with preserving these and providing access through facsimiles. So we created these facsimiles for many of the board games and printed them so people can handle them without worrying about the pressures of playing with historic material. Siobhan and Ruth Ann use these extensively in our outreach programs, especially for primary school, secondary school students. So historically, special collections have a reputation for being inaccessible to people and making them feel as though they don't belong. Everything is old, everything looks fragile, people don't want to touch it. So the act of play helps sort of demolish this idea of an ivory tower and encourages people to feel more comfortable with the material. They also, as I said, allow us to take these beyond the security of the local the library itself. And it increases the potential for the audience to be aware of what we have in these libraries and the kind of cultural heritage that we document. So for the Ricker Materials collection, the goal was similarly to develop a digital footprint for the collection. It was previously cataloged, but we determined that the standard library catalog record wasn't conducive to presenting these particular items in a digital environment. So really what Siobhan wanted was, it requires the senses looking at these items. So, she said she wanted, close zooms, almost like akin to holding these pieces up to your face, looking at the texture and grain of these things. And it's critical to understanding how these things can be used in manufacturing and prototyping. So she really wanted to create multimodal access to the collection. And regarding Brooks's scrapbooks and recipe box, the items highlight that while Brooks was an award-winning poet and mentor to decades of future writers, she was also a person who deeply cared about the people in her life and the health and future of her family. So the arrangement of the scrapbook is a testament to just how full her life is. The photos are stacked and placed in every corner as well as between the pages. And the digitization of the scrapbook was simultaneously a pre-conservation document of how Brooks kept her photographic records, as well as a beautiful document of life in Black Chicago between the 1940s and 80s. So there are many decisions the curators and digitization staff and me and metadata made about the digital representation of these physically complex library materials. So as I said before, we don't currently support 3D imaging in our lab, so we had to make smart and informed decisions about which views of the object to include. So we asked ourselves many questions when we planned this project, such as how do we authentically represent a translucent glass tile? How many views is enough for context for users to benefit from the images? What backgrounds are efficient? We bought a lot of material to make backgrounds, black backgrounds, gray backgrounds, you can see there, white backgrounds. An example of a really important decision we think we made, if you can look down here at the left bottom corner, we included folded views of each recipe in the recipe box and the recipe box in itself. We wanted to represent the material as if users were encountering it in the library. So we decided to create folded and unfolded views, whole composite images, and individual images. So digitization was not the only challenges we encountered in bringing these collections to our platform. So there are many challenges to creating metadata for this project, these 3 projects. So first, there's no official description playbook for digitized surrogates of really complex archival formats like this. You can do it at a collection level, but doing it as in like individual items within a scrapbook is hard. So second, it also proved challenging to create descriptions that retain the physicality of the physical object itself with the analog item as a digital surrogate. So we needed to ask ourselves questions about how to determine our metadata best practices. So how do we describe a physical object to make it discoverable as a digital object? How do we retain archival original order for digital objects? And finally, there are challenges to translating varied levels of description within archival collections. So Brooks, we decided to create and describe an album at the composite level as a whole, and created metadata for individual pages and photos. So one of the best illustrations of these challenges is our approach to different levels of digitization and coverage. So here we can see the digital object metadata for the Brooks Red album. It's one of the 2 albums we have, scrapbooks. So this is the description of the album as a whole. Obviously this isn't all the metadata, but I didn't want to put too much up there. But the item is described as a composite, and the materials within the album span from 1900 to 1990, and the contents contain 16 pages, 5 groupings of inserts, and 403 photographs. We also wanted to create metadata for the individual photographs and pages, which we had to kind of take apart for preservation. So we took that opportunity to also scan and describe these objects. So this allowed us to convey important information that would otherwise be lost if we only included composite level metadata. So as you can see, here is an individual photograph from Gwendolyn Brooks's Red album. We have the front and the back, and we have things like subject headings for Aurora College and Gwendolyn Brooks and things like that. So we also employed custom elements and targeted metadata to describe the physicality of these collections and convey the tactile properties of the materials. So this was particularly effective in the Ricker Materials collection. We included an element sensory properties in our metadata, which describes these properties using a logo vocabulary. So Siobhan and her student sat together, used this logo vocabulary, and literally described what it felt like. These objects felt like, were they stretchy, were they grainy, were they soft, hard, rough, so that the physicality of the object could be conveyed through the digital medium. So what makes a digital surrogate successful? We wanted to highlight a couple of renderings in the IIIF viewer that we think are particularly striking and great translations of these collections' physical aspects. So our first successful item here is Brooks's recipe box. There's just something about the way we were able to make the real action of removing and unfolding within these images that captures the true spirit of care and exploration in the item. So the material in the recipe box is traditional paper as well as newspaper. So the digital surrogate makes it easier to interact with as the physical material is extremely delicate. And by digitizing the recipe box, we are not only taking steps to preserve it for the future, but we are also working to share the experience the item creates, and we've created some physical facsimiles from these digitized objects when we've had events about Brooks. Another example, this is my favorite one, of a successful translation into the viewer is the whole of the historic board games collection. So it was important that we not only showed exactly how much fun was sort of packed into these games, but also the dynamism and movement inherent in their use. So the pieces of the games are interchangeable, and we wanted to pay ode to the original marketing on the box. It's a game for everyone, you know, a lot of different pieces. So we also included multiple setups for this collection because we wanted to treat the digital images like headshots. And we were absolutely floored by the quality of the images and the sense of movement and play they impart. So even though we're not yet able to use 3D imaging, these choices that we made, I think, convey the fact that these are very real objects, and I think they do a better job of when we digitize just manuscripts in a 2D format. So thank you very much. If you want to discuss this topic in more depth, please reach out to me, and I look forward to questions.
Cummins up to present here in just a minute, but I'm going to change computers, so. Oops. You don't have to worry about it.
Hi, sorry about that. I usually bring the most annoying laptop to conferences, just to test people, including myself. So now I'm using 2 laptops, so bear with me. Hi, my name is Andy. I work at a company called Cogapp. I'm the managing director there. I've been doing this kind of work, digital work in the sort of cultural field for many years, roughly 20. And today, I'm going to talk to you about the Huntington, who is one of our many clients. You can see them here. Some of these go back 20, 30 years. We've been doing collections with many of them for throughout that time. So all these green ones are people that we've put their art, usually art, occasionally archival library collections more recently. And by more recently, I mean like in the last decade. And then we've also been working with IIIF for quite some time, where the ones that are on the screen now are where we've been doing that as well. So the Huntington is one of our newer clients. We've been working with them for about 2 or 3 years. They are based in San Marino in Los Angeles, founded in 1919 by a railroad magnate, Henry, and his wife Arabella. The long form name is the Huntington Library, Museum and Botanical Gardens. So the interesting thing here is that there are 3 sort of different collecting divisions within one organization, and they're very much a destination for folks to go and visit as well. So they have a general public, local, international as well. It's an incredible place. I had never heard of it until maybe 5, 6 years ago. Here's they've got the art museum on the bottom left there. That's Henry's old house. On the right is the library, and there's another art museum among the trees there in the gardens. It's an active collecting organisation. Got 12 million items in the library, 45,000 artworks, and about 83 living specimens of living plants. They've got Japanese garden, Chinese garden, cactus garden, a Shakespeare garden. They've got lots of gardens. It's a big place. The initial bequest was quite huge. I think the library was at one point the largest library in the USA. So they've got very, very, very priceless, very sensitive objects, including a Gutenberg Bible, several Gainsboroughs, interestingly a rare SciCAD collection, some of which there are only one of them remaining, so they can only keep the line going by propagating the male plant, I think, and that one in particular. But then they've also been recently acquiring many, many things with a focus more on, less on what they were bequeathed, more on maybe what the local communities around the organisation are interested in. So there's sort of 20th century postcards from the Philippines, Betty Saar sculptures, and there's also all sorts of things. They've got Pacific Rim curator who's tending to the local sort of Asian communities and things in the sort of Pasadena, San Marino area. Here are the pictures, and this is me forgetting I'm using 2 laptops at the same time. Oh yeah, corpse flower, they've got one of those. They've actually got a lot of these. They're the stinky flower. Everyone loves the stinky flower. They come in their droves to smell the stinky flower. It only blooms for like one night, I think, every 10 years or something. But they've got a bunch of these now. And they're actually quite terrifying when you see them. I've never seen one in bloom, but they're absolutely massive. So at Cogapp, like I said, we put collections online, we do lots of other things. We sort of do through strategic thinking, through design, UX, technology, and most of the work we do is grounded in the organisational goals. So it's not sort of, quite often they're not very small projects, there'll be a project as part of a bigger programme of work. And the bigger programme of work at Huntington, you'll see how quick it is to say the Huntington compared to the Huntington Library, Art Museum, and Botanic Gardens, is that they want to be presented as one organisation. They don't want this splintered perception to be, to continue. So the library obviously do all of their work, the Art Museum are doing their work, and the Botanical Gardens are doing theirs, but they are all trying to deliver on the goals of the organisation. And this project I'm talking about now is really one sort of sliver of our work and others in trying to present this work as a coherent whole to the general public, whilst maintaining the specialist audiences that they obviously serve. So it's active digitisation as well that's going on. It's been going on for quite some time, particularly in the library. So they've been doing digitisation since the early 90s, or late 90s rather, with the Art Museum doing it since the early 2000s. And then Botanical Garden are catching up. So they've only really been taking photographs of the plants in the gardens for the last year, but they've already got 20,000. So we'll see how quickly that changes. And the Huntington have been disseminating this information for a very long time. As soon as they were digitising things, they were really sharing them with the world. So I'm just going to do a brief sort of before and after style thing to show you what they were doing before, talk you through a bit of what we've done, which is prototype a unified collection for them, because it's one organisation. So it's sort of doing before and after. So this is how the library, until recently, but then this will remain the system of record as a librarian. If you want to go and do deep research, you can get into these tools. This one is Content DM. This is a light touch branding on this, so this is an off-the-shelf product. We're a small sliver in this work that I was talking about. There was also a huge rebrand of the entire organisation, and that's a big deal. I think it probably took a year and a half, 2 years or something. And then we're also then redeveloping the website. There's a new ticketing platform. There's a new membership. Everything basically, new everything. So one of the key things here for our use of IIIF is that we were able to be flexible throughout this process. Prototype, have the people at the Huntington do their testing, do their due diligence on what they were going to present to the world in this new form. So this is Content DM. That's been around since 2011. And this is the Art Museums. This is eMuseum for any museum folks, and for everybody else, it's an add-on to the museum system, which is the sort of main collection management system that museums use. or particularly American museums. The botanical gardens didn't really, they didn't have a page like this, you know, this was their page effectively. But what they did have was maps, so they were much more keen on presenting where these things were in the gardens so folks could find them. So these are individual plants in the gardens with you know, GPS or geo-reference. So as I said, what we were trying to, then we were employed to try and figure out how to start this unification of activities in the high activities that the Huntington were presented. So it is this incredible place, everyone busy doing their work, but it is all in the pursuit of the overall mission. So how did we prototype, how did we draw all this information together from many systems, which you'll see Tristan's diagram in a moment, which there's no way, you know, I couldn't have drawn it because there's too many and I don't remember them all. But everything was in silos, but particularly images. And silos gives maybe, you know, that feels like you're putting things there on purpose a little bit. Some of them are in places, you know, you don't expect, like every organization. So from Dropbox to Flickr to Google Photos to actual systems of record in the organization. So a precursor to our work was a huge piece of work by the digital team there to introduce a digital asset management system, Orange Dam in this case from Orange Logic, which, you know, has IIIF built in. And several of these systems I just mentioned have IIIF built in, so we're able to take advantage. I feel like we're getting to the point now where these vendors, there's enough of them with some level of support that it allows you to be more flexible as you move through these kind of larger transitional projects. So here is Tristan's diagram, it's very pretty. You've got all the systems with collections information at Huntington. On the left is the new dams, Orange Logic, Orange Dam from Orange Logic, and then synchronization processes between these systems to get all of the images into Orange Dam in the future, well, basically now. This was to consolidate everything from the three divisions in terms of images, and then our work took that up from there and started taking how can we consolidate all the metadata from all of the images, you know, that are in this slide. You know, there's Sierra, some, there's a lot of them basically, and they all do something and they're all required. So how do we put them all in one place so that as a, say, a person from the general public, you just want to find a thing. You don't need to know which repository it's in to do that search. So what we did was create a prototype, a high fidelity prototype, but deliberately unstyled to park all the branding stuff that was going on. We're really just trying to prove the point that it is possible to get this information out into a data model that will support this kind of discovery for people. So these are where the images were coming from when we began the project. So during the prototype phase, we were drawing IIIF images from eMuseum for artworks, Content DM for library digitized assets, and Botanical, because they just started their digitization program, was able to put their images directly into the new dams. And here's the high fidelity prototype, not in terms of design, so that's on purpose. So this is a library item, you know, pretty typical. You've got the metadata on the left, IIIF image viewer on the right. We've got the Gainsborough from the Art Museum, ditto, you know, different kinds of information, but all coming from the same amalgamated, unified data search application server that we configured and populated, and then for the first time, botanical information in that same way, not just on the map, and with the images that, you know, we didn't really have images of the botanical gardens before. So I did have to edit this slide because it was going to say launched yesterday, but it's launched next week. So there's some final data cleanup going on at the Huntington, but this is very, very close to launch, so I can give you a quick spin around it in a moment. But you'll notice that this will look very different to what was there before, including the new brand and everything that went along with it. As I've shown you this before, all the images were coming from different places. Now they're all coming from a single orange logic dam system. And during development, this is the point, during development, very easy to switch these things out, very easy to be flexible along the way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do this in such a dynamic program of work that was going on. And it's still doing, really. So hopefully this can play.
So here we have the collections landing page. You see there's a search box, and then what we have is some curated collections of different objects. In this case, again, all of the images are coming from the digital asset management system, either from the objects themselves or content managed via Drupal. So here, for example, we're looking at the roses collection. If we pick one of these, then we come to the object page itself, where you can see all of the metadata on the left with a click to do can searches and expand your search. On the right, we have the image viewer, and again, in a full screen mode, and using OpenSeaDragon. And then we will also have the embedded map there to locate it within the extensive grounds, and some follow-on journeys to find similar objects as well.
So that's, this is Tristan's RP Radio 4 voice for the demo, obviously. Exposing his love of Barbara Streisand to the world. So that's the Botanical Gardens. Next is there's one from the Art Museum and one from the library.
And explore the whole collection by going to the search page, and here you can see the results from across all 3 different divisions, over 1 million items there, and down the left we have lots of filters and ways to narrow your results. If we look at, say, the Art Museum, and then go and pick maybe some of the paintings, then you can see we have multiple results, again, image thumbnails being drawn directly from the dams. And when we click on a result, what we see is this familiar left and right layout here with object information on the left, images on the right, and then onward journeys at the bottom.
And then finally, a library.
If we return to the search page, we can start to have a look at some of the library items. In this case, I know the call number for the archive that I'm looking for, in this case the Jack London papers. So in this case we have hierarchical archival information, so we need to change the layout a bit to deal with information that is largely textual. And also on the left here we have this hierarchy viewer box where we can expand and contract it and just explore the whole archive. What we can see is some of these levels of the archive have images associated with them, indicated by the little camera icon. Again, these small thumbnail indicators are drawn directly from the dams. And if I expand these and select one of them, we see on the left, continue to see our place in the hierarchy. On the right, we now have the image viewer again, but in this case, we see there are a large number of images. So I can use the slider at the bottom to go and move from image to image, but we also have a button here that triggers a full screen overlay, browse all of the images very quickly, and then maybe select another one. It will fast forward me to that place. Then similarly, we have, in this case, the description down below and the follow-on links to similar items there as well.
Thank you, Tristan. And so, in short, this is one of the big thing here for me is how more and more of these systems are beginning to incorporate IIIF in them, and it's a way of iterating quickly, prototyping, bringing things to production not on a large scale, basically. And to me, it's one of those things that, as a group, as a community, it's a way of advocating for IIIF in your organisation at scale, because it can also enable these projects to run more smoothly and be more cost effective as well. the prototype process gave access to all of the internal stakeholders throughout, despite these huge changes internally that happened along the way. That's it. Thank you. And yeah, next week.
Up next, we were faster on the computer this time. Up next, we have Ian McCrabb presenting Glycerine Institutional Integration.
So thanks to the IIIF team for the opportunity to present. I appreciate your indulgence with my accent. I'm afraid we're all going to be stuck with my A's. I'll give a brief overview of the Glycerine suite and then unpack our institutional integration strategy. So Systemik has been around for 30 years as an IT consulting group, and over the last 5 years or so we've morphed into a digital humanities lab. We develop and support a range of open source DH platforms. We develop workbenches spanning AI text analysis, corpus linguistics, philology, mapping, and of course image annotation with Glycerine. We built Glycerine for its research affordances, for its curatorial application in the GLAM sector, and for its educational potential. We built a prototype in 2022 and then developed through 2023 with funding support from the Australian Research Data Commons. We launched in Australia late last year and are only just commencing our international launch. So the value proposition is that it provides a suite of annotation tools and end-to-end workflows for collaboration on projects across repositories. Sets of annotations can combine semantic tags from domain-specific vocabularies with critical analysis in multiple languages and can be published as research outputs in immersive and engaging formats. In the last year, we've radically expanded our design brief from a workbench to a framework for institutional implementation. So Glycerine's components are Workbench, which is the workflow interface, Viewer, which is an open source IIIF viewer, Server, which is the back-end data model and image server, Editor, our app for workflow integration, and we have a CMS plugin, a WordPress plugin for research outputs. What I'll do is I'll introduce Workbench and Viewer and then come back to expand on how the server and editor modules can be integrated into an existing workflow and infrastructure. So I'll start with Workbench and do a very, very brief walkthrough of the foundational workflows. What you see on the screen is that I have the image Gandhara collection selected, and I can go into any of the 4 image sets and start working on the annotations. Of course, I can add a new collection at that stage as well. I can add a new image set to that collection with options to upload or link to images and to import from a manifest. I can then go in and start creating my annotations for that image with the annotation tools. I can then tag an annotation with terms from scholarly vocabularies. I can then share the collection with a collaborator, and I can publish the annotated image. And all of these features from the Workbench interface are also accessible via API. We've implemented widely in the Australian research sector over the last 2 years on projects ranging across cultural history, art history and epigraphy, and we've trialled its educational potential with art history students. We're currently piloting the platform with handwritten manuscripts, both with large-scale transcriptions and marginalia. What I'll do is I'll walk through a representative project where we partnered with galleries and museums that had collections of Gandharan artefacts, just to demonstrate Glycerine Viewer. So our viewer supports, of course, the IIIF presentation API and manifests built with Glycerine or with other compliant tools. It's been developed with a Vue 3 framework, but now has a JavaScript wrapper and has an elegant interface. Our focus is to build out a comprehensive annotation feature set around use cases for galleries, libraries and museums. It's open source on GitHub for community collaboration. In Glycerine Viewer, one can click intuitively around the image for annotations of each of the components and then drill down from captions and descriptions to elite scholarship. One can click on tags that have been applied, in this case from a specialist Gandharan art vocabulary. One can show notes, in this case they are footnotes from previous scholarship. One can use a range of filters to display multiple languages, show mine or my collaborators' annotations. One can filter levels or layers of annotations to implement a containment hierarchy. One can toggle between a default view and a table view so that the annotations are accessible as data. In this peer-reviewed journal article about that item, the annotated image is prefaced by content about its provenance and significance. One can then examine each annotated component individually. What I'll do now is a very brief overview of our positioning in the IIIF ecosystem. So Glycerine supports import of local URL and IIIF images, existing manifests, TI files and custom import via API. So the annotated images can be viewed in Glycerine or any other IIIF viewer. The manifest can be elaborated upon in any IIIF compliant tool, and the data can all be accessed via API. So interoperability with the ecosystem is pretty straightforward. We can import a manifest from any repository or any compliant tool. The image collections and sets can then be exported as manifests with all the annotation data encapsulated in the manifest. We have a long-term sustainability strategy which encompasses compliance with IIIF and web annotation standards, that we export all the data into the manifest, there's a persistent ID solution, and we have an image archiving strategy. So what I'll do now is a very brief overview of optional approaches to hosting and implementation. So we support a range of implementation patterns. As you can see on the left-hand side, Workbench is hosted as software as a service by ARDC for Australians and on AWS by Systemik. So a variation on this is that the organisations customise and theme Viewer in their own content management system. What I actually want to unpack is in the bottom right-hand side is the Glycerine server editor pattern. So what I'll do that. So as I prefaced last year, we built out modules to support integration with institutional infrastructure. So there's the Glycerine server, which is our back-end module, and Glycerine editor, which is our annotation widget. Firstly, Glycerine server provides the data model and APIs for integration with the institution's digital asset management and collections management systems. It provides access to all of Glycerine's IIIF support, collection and collaboration features. Glycerine image server is a IIIF image server built on Cantaloupe, which provides a controlled environment for resource access and management. Glycerine editor provides the annotation editing features of Workbench, which I showed just before, with a minimalist viewer user experience. So curators can create and edit annotations from within their existing collections management workflows. GLAM institutions and cultural aggregators can integrate editor into their content management system and support external contributors and to add annotation layers from their site. So from a very high level perspective of this implementation pattern, Server provides a back-end model and APIs for integration with the existing digital asset management infrastructure. Our editor widget can be embedded into existing collections management workflows or indeed in the organisation's content management system for external contributors. Viewer can be themed and embedded in a content management system, but of course you can use any IIIF viewer in that context. What I'll do now is unpack an implementation architecture for a mainstream use case where the organisation has existing IIIF infrastructure. So this use case presumes the organisation has existing infrastructure. In the flowchart, this is captioned as the data management system. So the existing data management system, be it a digital asset or collections management, has its own IIIF implementation, which can generate manifests from its data models. Glycerine Editor is installed and configured in this data management system. Glycerine Editor gets the manifests without any annotations from the data management system and reads and writes annotations from and to the Glycerine server using our web annotation API. So when serving up IIIF for Glycerine Viewer and a website, the data management system aggregates the annotations from Glycerine server into a full manifest. Now this is our mainstream use case. We are anticipating a number of other variations. I won't attempt to unpack all those other patterns, just briefly trace them. In this one, there is no existing IIIF implementation. So for a smaller organisation that hasn't gone down that track, in this case it's all vanilla Glycerine. Glycerine Editor is installed in their data management system and is integrated out of the box with Glycerine Server, which acts as both IIIF and annotation server. Glycerine Viewer gets manifests directly from Glycerine Server in this pattern. And lastly, at the other end of the spectrum, this is where large organisations prefer to use their own annotations data store, as well as their own IIIF infrastructure. In this case, Glycerine Editor is installed in the data management system and reads and writes the existing data store using web annotation protocol. Again, Glycerine Viewer gets manifests from the existing data management system. Okay, so just to summarise. The key features of Editor include that it's implemented as a JavaScript widget. It has the full annotation feature set of Workbench. Your annotations are stored in the browser cache and can be exported as a manifest. But the editor saves the annotations out of the box to Glycerine Server, or indeed any web annotation protocol compliant data store. You can also come up with, save the data to a custom storage by interacting with editor events. So just in terms of hosting, and as far as hosting and usage is concerned, we provide a hosted subscription service for Workbench. Of course, it's free for entry level. And Viewer and WordPress plugins are open source. We provide integration consulting and then annual support options for the server and editor modules. So very, very flexible and open to any sort of arrangement for these things. You can try a demo of Editor right now on our site. We've begun a trial of the integration of server and editor with some existing partners in our region, and we'll extend the trial in the latter part of June. We'll communicate out through the IIIF channels about the process for joining the trial and access to the modules and the implementation guide. So if you've not already found it, Glycerine is at glycerine.io. On our homepage is the Buddha triad I've demonstrated, as well as access to register and use the platform. You can try Viewer and Editor, and there are links to both user and development and developer documentation. So I do encourage you to go and register with Editor. We'll make sure we follow through with an implementation guide for all the people who register with Editor. So thanks for your indulgence and attention. Really hope you'll have a look and give us any feedback that you can. So thanks very much.